Hello guys, this is Yusin. The topic of my research essay is the state-sponsored doping scandal of Russian elite athletes from 1990 to 2017. The reason why this research is politically pertinent is because it presents a perfect example of a country's domestic response to foreign stimulus, which is also the central idea of the textbook that we're using at this present moment. In this case, specifically for Russia, the diplomatic pressure and the homogeneous global culture are served as external stimulants to which the state-sponsored sport conspiracy can be understood as a domestic response encouraged by Russia's distinct economic context and its unique political culture. And in terms of the structure of this essay, in order to better understand the causes and effects of Russia's state-sponsored athlete doping conspiracy, some explanations will be drawn from Russia's history and culture under the former communist regime, which led to sports become an expression of Russian nationalism in the first place. And furthermore, this paper aims to underscore the effects of globalization and the commercialization of sports on Russia's official attitude towards sports under its specific economic structure. And finally, it will anatomize how political factors have sublimated the Russia national athlete into a powerful diplomatic tool and how they have become inextricably intertwined with the elite athlete doping scandal that lasted from 1990 to 2017 in Russia. The Soviet Union started participating in international sport events shortly after World War II and soon achieved a dominant position in Olympic Games and many other competitions. At the present time, Russia's state-sponsored development of biochemistry for enhancing their athletes' performance has become an open secret since the 1970s. As some of the pioneers who violated the set regulation concerning the athlete drug use, the Soviet Union runners were first given the creatine supplements under the direction of the State Sport Committee during the 1970s and the 1980s. Within the following decade, the government-sponsored research institution focused on the development of blood doping, which aims to improve the oxygen-carrying capacity of blood, thus enhancing the athlete's cardio endurance. Despite the disclosure of this secret scientific research and its evident results shown in Olympic Games within the 14 years period after the commencement of the research, there is still sound evidence that indicates the use of illegal measure amongst the Russian elite athletes in many mega sport events. According to Marcus Noland, the executive vice president of Peterson Institute for International Economics, he points out that Russian athletes have accounted for 35% of the performance-enhancing drug positive results since the World Anti-Doping Agency began tracking the data in 2010. As the chief culprit of this entire controversy, the nation of Russia, of course, cannot escape its moral responsibility. And more essentially, Russia's persisting violation to the International Olympic Committee's set regulations suggests a greater political agenda in which Russia's leadership has been using sport as a tool for attaining certain economic and diplomatic goals. It is believed that the commercialization of sports has a significant impact on Russia's attitude towards this industry. Even though the revelation of the doping scandal after the Sochi Olympics has done extensive damage to Russia's soft power, the international sporting achievements and the hosting of the world-level events are still seen as the promising platform to announce Russia's presence in the international community. Also, a massive amount of money has been put into building infrastructure for the Sochi Olympics and the FIFA World Cup during the 2010s. The return of these investments spent on infrastructure during the two consecutive world-level events within a decade, it not only consists of the economic benefits that lie within the local tourism industry, but more importantly, it represents a significant political achievement in terms of portraying a powerful international image for Russia. Therefore, up to this point of the essay, it is reasonable to argue that In a society where sport has become increasingly commercialized and profit orientated, the fair competitions are unsurprisingly compromised by its economy and also the political values that are given to it. The collapse of the Soviet Union obviously did not impede the perpetuation of its national identity thanks to the interaction between sports and politics. The legacy inherited from its Soviet era is effectively consolidated under the Putin's regime, using sports as a seemingly apolitical approach to achieve a certain political result is considered one of the critical components of Putin's legitimacy, regardless of his statement, which claims the opposite, that sports should not be the tool for any political persuasion. So, by taking advantage of the political culture that is preserved from the USSR period, it is fairly effortless for Russia's leaders to propagate a nationalist ideology through sport. Consequently, for Russian athletes, the successful results attained in many international sport competition naturally outweighs their participation and the fundamental idea of sportsmanship. It is as well important to mention the idea of a national champion, which was introduced by the president of the Russian Federation. Well, it's basically the intention to construct a concrete connection between Russia's leading corporations and the state. And the reason why sports and Russia's nationalism are so intertwined is perfectly illustrated by this idea. For example, Gazprom, which is also known as the natural gas giant, is the biggest company in Russia. And shortly after the Russian national ice hockey team won the World Championship in 2008, Gazprom became one of the biggest sponsors of Russia national ice hockey team and Russian ice hockey in general. Unsurprisingly, the Russian government possesses about 50% of ownership to the Gazprom company. So it's fairly obvious that the intended combination of the state and many of its enormous profit-generating corporations presents an intimidating image to the international community in terms of its power and identity. So considering that the sport industry in Russia is also extensively influenced by this very political agenda, sports have inevitably become more gravitated towards the economic interests to generate, and also they have transformed into a political apparatus that helps symbolize Russia's national prestige. During the 2000s and 2010s, Russia uses sports as an effective leverage to alleviate the tension with its western neighbor Ukraine. The sensitive relationship between Russia and Ukraine can be understood as the aftermath of the Cold War. Russia's divergent political values compared to that of the West germinate serious mistrust between Russia and plenty of its westernized neighboring countries. Provoked by the pro-Western leadership in Ukraine, the political conflict sparked between the two sides of the border grew intensively. The volatile political climate that surrounds Russia obviously has a significant impact on the sport industry, but more importantly, it made it possible for sport to sublimate into a diplomatic weapon in leveraging Russia's relationship with Ukraine. For instance, certain decisions made by the Russian Football Union might seem completely apolitical to an outsider, while instead, these politically gravitated decisions not only compromise the directness of an actual diplomatic negotiation, but they're also marked by their undeniable efficiency. So, after all, from the perspective of Russia, using sport as a diplomatic weapon, including its expecting results of state-sponsored athlete doping, they can be seen as a political agenda for building its soft power in order to perpetuate its post-communist regime under Putin's leadership. As indicated by various examples shown during the discussion, we can safely conclude that for Russia, sport is basically a non-physical, non-military political exhibition for its national identity as a post-communist country. Despite the undisputable moral drawback that is embedded in Russia's cheating behavior during multiple world-level competition, after having a better understanding of sports' nature explicitly for Russia, it is more precise to categorize its doping scandal as a diplomatic mistake made during the propagation of nationalist political ideology. In terms of the action of a state sponsored athlete doping itself, this case study presents a perfect example of a country's domestic response to foreign stimulus. The foreign stimulus includes the diplomatic pressure between Russia and Ukraine, the commercialization of sports, and the rising power of capitalism as its counter political ideology. Russia's corresponding reaction to this series of global effects is to use sport as a seemingly apolitical method to first strengthen its economy and second, exert its nationalist spirit by doping its athletes and dominating in most world level competitions in order to wrestle against the Western capitalism. And this domestic response has, of course, evolved from Russia's distinct economic context and its unique political culture.